Alright, hello everybody, it is Tomster here on behalf of Indie Structural Productions, and we are back with another Scum build video. This is the Inlays Part 2. Now, sit back and relax, because this is gonna take a little while. Yeah, I'm gonna say straight off the bat, I did not do any animation stuff for this episode, just because it's already a fairly detail-oriented thing. So, I don't want to kind of overdo things too much. Anywho, first things first, I am marking out the center lines for each of the frets that my fretboard inlays are going to go on. Very simple process. It's like, first, just make sure that you know where your inlays are going to go. Trust me, this is something I check 1,000 times over because I'm so paranoid that I'm going to put the marker on the wrong fret, which would kind of be very, very bad. So I check and recheck and then check again, then recheck that recheck of the I just check a bunch of times. So, marking out the center lines for each so that the placement will be correct. Fortunately, these are rather symmetrical shapes, so they are very easy to place on the center of the fret. Well, not the fret, but you know what I mean. And now, of course, checking that it is in the middle. So I have proper placement. Now this is where it gets very tedious. I need to hold this in place and mark out with a very fresh scalpel blade, I might add. So holding it in place, I'm just gonna lightly score the wood just to mark the position of the inlay. Then once I actually remove the inlay, I go about making those cuts a good bit deeper. Like so. Now I'm just scoring the wood, making sure that the cut is nice and deep, so I have a good place to work to. There are multiple ways that you can do this. You can do this entirely by hand with a chisel, but I decided to make my life a little easier. As you might notice, I'm not at the workshop currently. This is on the weekend, so I borrowed some tools. Mainly, I borrowed the Proxon. I might add that it's Christopher's Proxon with... no wait, it's Ben's Proxon but with Christopher's bit. Yeah, that's the way it goes. And I've put a little piece of masking tape to act as a sort of fan. That will then blow away all the dust, so I can actually see what I'm doing. I don't go all the way to the edge, but I get close enough. And then the rest I'll just do by hand. Don't go all the way to the edge just in case I screw up. I love this tool. It's so handy. Yeah. That just ensures that I get a nice clean cut that is the same depth all the way through. Then with the scalpel, I clean up all the rest. This is where having a fresh scalpel blade really makes the difference, because you can just peel away all the excess wood. And get into all those corners and fiddly bits. And then of course, using my trusty inlay chisels to help out the process somewhat. It's just a combination of using the Proxon and then using a few small hand tools and it gets you a nice snug fit each time. Of course, once the cavity itself is done, it's time to try and fit the inlay. If it doesn't sit properly, I have to go back and take away some edges or modify the inlay itself a little bit. And I realized that that one side of the inlay wasn't exactly, or it didn't have a square edge, so I had to kind of rectify that with the scalpel blade. Already fits a lot better on one side, the other side is still giving me trouble. So it is very, very fiddly, I'll give you that. But this is something that you don't want to kind of half-ass, you do want to do it right. Because the more snug the fit, the better the outcome is going to look. There we are. It's almost there. Almost. Just needs a little bit of help. So I'm going to apply a spot of super glue. Don't need much. Just a little bit. Because the piece you're inlaying will kind of move it around quite a bit. Be very careful when doing this. You should have some safety goggles on just in case the glue does spurt. You don't want that splurting in your eye. And then I'm using just the wood handle from I think that's a paint scrape. And I'm using that to kind of press the inlay into place. There we are. And then I just repeat the same process with everything. Here you can see just how much I take away with the Proxon and then how much is left to do by hand. There is quite a bit, but the Proxon doesn't, or at least the bit that I had, doesn't fit all the way into those very, very tiny corners. So of course, I need a blade to do that. Nope. Almost there. And yes, I'm pretty sure you've guessed that I have sped this up somewhat. I wanted to keep the first one in real time just because then you get a better idea of how long it actually takes and give me a chance to actually explain things a little better. So with all the fretboard inlays in, I gotta figure out how or where to put the back inlay. And once again, center line is extremely important. One of the most important things about guitar building is pretty much centering everything, having your center lines exactly where they should be, because those kind of direct the positioning of your bridges, your humbuckers, your inlays, pretty much everything. So you do need to be careful. Because if something's off, then everything's going to get thrown off a bit, and then you're just going to get sad at how things didn't work out the way you wanted them to. Now, Monday morning, back at the workshop, and working on the back inlay plate. Oh, I'm sorry. I should turn my phone off. There we are. So, this is pretty much exactly the same method as with the fretboard inlays. I put the pieces in place. This is me trying to figure out exactly where I want them to be placed. What I have done is I've printed the birds on a piece of paper, and I've glued the piece of paper onto pieces of wood, and then cut the birds out in different pieces. I seem to have lost that footage somewhere, so I'm very sorry for that. But alas, stuff like that happens. So same process. Basically need to figure out the placement and then use a new scalpel blade to score the wood. So I know what material to excavate. Speeding this up again, just to make things a little easier. The reason why the bird is in this many pieces is because of the grain directions. I wanted the body to be one single piece, then the wing to have grain direction going a different way, and the tail having the grain direction go another way. So that kind of gives a better illusion of a real bird instead of just something that's has a constant grain going all the way through it. Or at least I think it kind of helps. And there are slightly different colors as well. I did try and pick pieces that suited the picture. Alright, then the same thing, using the Proxon to excavate all that material. Now, I really hate the fact that I lost a lot of footage from this. So what you won't see is me putting in the first pieces, so the pieces that I was marking out right there, and the blackbird as well, and then gluing them in. But it's literally just putting them in and flooding the cavities with glue and flooding the birds with glue and just putting glue all over the place. Just to ensure that there are no gaps. And then going from there. And then sanding it all down with the drum sander again, as I did before. It's a shame. That was so much fun to actually see that happen, but yeah. Oh, there we go. Yeah. So yeah, you will see the process repeated soon. Now, this part of the wing had some darker areas to it, like shading and shadows. Of course, I can't really do shading and shadows that well with just inlaying pieces of wood, so I'm using a heat gun to drive that point through. So whenever there's a dark edge or darker edge, I just use the heat gun on the lighter woods to achieve a sort of shadow or shade. I do the same thing with the bird's skull, because it does have an edge to it that gives the illusion of it being a lot rounder. Instead of 2D, it makes it look 3D. Now there you can see the first pieces of the birds are set, and now I did the same thing where I marked out the pieces that I'm putting in next, and then I'm cutting them out before placing them in. It's pretty much the same mentality, same processes repeated over and over again to finally achieve the inlay you want to do. So in other words, I'm kind of inlaying on an inlay a few times over. I think this had, oh god, I don't know. I think this back inlay plate probably had about 4 stages to it. And also very important that make sure that you move the piece that you're cutting instead of moving your saw around. So your saw is at a constant position, and then you move your piece around there. You work around your piece. And I needed some ebony dust to clear up some holes. Well, not some holes, but clear up some cavities and make everything look a lot nicer, a lot cleaner. And of course, gathering excess ebony dust to use as using the production department. Oh, there you can see a box of cookies that I made. So that means that this is filmed on my birthday. I kind of have a long tradition of just baking cookies for wherever I'm working at that time. And that scene, I saw the box of cookies there in the corner, so yeah. Now moving on. I am working on the darker areas of the skeleton for the dark bird. And to do that, I am using the ebony dust that you saw. So I'm gonna, instead of inlay pieces of ebony, which I could do, I'm instead going to engrave some parts of the bird and then fill those up with ebony dust. That kind of achieves the same sort of goal that I have in mind. Also makes my life a whole lot easier. I don't need to get too fiddly with things, but still make it look good. And of course I do the same thing with the white bird as well. But fortunately it only has the eye to do. So there's not that much work. I don't know if you can see the shading there on the back wing, but it is ever so slight. And yeah, first pour in the super glue, then dab ebony dust all over it, and then put some more super glue in. Oh, excuse me. I always sneeze twice. So, and excuse me again. So yeah, super glue, ebony dust, dab, 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 more super glue, dab, 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 and then, if need be, more ebony dust. A fairly straightforward process, a very messy, but very straightforward process. I'm just using the super glue to kind of make sure that everything goes in place as they should. And then off to the drum sander to sand everything down. There you can see, that's pretty much what it looks like the first few passes. So I'm taking very, very, very small amounts because this is just engraving. I don't want to sand through all of that. I just want it to take off the top layer of glue, so to speak. And there we are. Simple as that. It's already starting to look very nice. Now in order to fit the back inlay into place, I made a template that is literally just a circle. I used the plate itself as a sort of template in order for me to make this template, if that made any sense. But yeah, basically I'm just using this Triton router to excavate all the excess material. And I'm making sure that my depth stops are where they need to be. I think the plate itself is about 4 mil thick, I think. Might have been like 3.8 if I remember correctly. Something like that. So I'm trying to make sure that I only go down that amount and no more, because I don't want the inlay to be sunk in. If anything, it can be slightly proud, ever so slightly, by 1/4 of a mil or something like that, but preferably I would want to have it completely flush with the back. So that is what I am trying to do here. I'm taking my time, taking very small passes just to be on the safe side. The thing is that the further in I go, or the further out I go, the less space I have for the router to sit. So I need to be very careful that I don't tip the router at any point and try and keep it balanced on the edge of the template. Very nerve-wracking, I have to say, but fortunately I knew what I was doing. Just really thinking things through before actually going for it. As you can see that there is a little edge. Now you can see that I'm not going all the way to the edge of the template. Oh, getting sawdust in my eyes. Should be wearing goggles at this point. Mind you, you should wear goggles when doing this. And yeah, it's a bearing cutter that's running along the edge of the template that I've made. That ensures that I don't go any further than I have to. Thumbs up. Alright, now time to sand. Because before putting in the inlay, I want to sand the back of this guitar down. Actually, I want to sand most of this guitar down to as far as I can get it. Or far as makes sense. So, probably to about 180 would make sense right around now. And then go back to 240 and 320 once the inlay's in. One part that you haven't seen in between these two inlay videos is me carving the neck of the guitar and the heel carve. I didn't want to put that in between these two videos because it didn't make sense, so you'll just see that next week. So tune in for that. It just makes sense to have two inlay videos back to back instead of going into a different topic all of a sudden, and then everybody being like, hey, where's the inlay part 2 video. Anywho, with the top, I've already sanded it down to, I think, 180, so I'm going to 240 at this point, and then 320, just because there's not much more work to be done on the front of the guitar. So I can easily take it down to 320, or take it up to 320, and then do the same thing with the sides. The back just gets to be a little bit rougher for now. And here I am using the orbital sander as square as I can. I can see from holding it in this way exactly where it's sanding. Making sure that it stays as square as I can keep it. I could use the disc sander behind me, but I kind of like this way of doing things. I like the orbital sander. I actually love this Merca sander, but I like how it works, and it's intuitive for me, so it makes sense. Just need to be very careful when sanding hard to softwood, because it is very easy for there to be a slight bump in between those two, because in this case the Meranti will sand a lot better than the maple and beech, so there might be a slight bump in the transition between the two, so I have to be very careful not to press at all and let the sandpaper do all the work, so to speak. Now, same thing with the fretboard inlays and the other inlay work. I'm using the scalpel just to get to the very, very edge. I did leave just a little bit to be on the safe side. This just seems to make more sense to me. I can actually fit the inlay in by doing this, so that it doesn't really move around, because when I glue it I won't be able to see it properly, so if it does move and it goes out of line, then that causes issues. if I fit it perfectly, it won't move around that much, or at all, which is kind of what I'm hoping. In the end, it actually didn't move at all, so everything panned out very, very well. Now that gluing phase. So I'm using fast set for some reason. I don't think we had any more of the alkaline or type bond that wasn't fast set, so this will do. But nonetheless, I'm gluing in such a small part, so it doesn't really make all that much difference. It's not like the glue's gonna dry before I get to clamp anything on. So I'm putting in somewhat of a generous amount. Not too much, but enough to do the job very well. And as we are, in fact, reaching the end of the video, I'm gonna already at this point say that thank you for tuning in, watching the video, and hit that like button. That's how my videos actually get seen by more people. If you hit the little bell so that you'll get notifications when I put out new videos, that also helps a whole lot. So I would really appreciate it if you do that. Subscribe to see more if you haven't already, and comment down below to let me know what you think. And yeah, now that I've said all that, I can get back to the video. So there, I am making sure that it is definitely in line with the little markings I put in. I have, you can't really see it here, but I have drawn the center line on there again, just to make sure that I can align it perfectly. I have clamping calls on both sides, just so that I don't damage anything. And now it's all a matter of just distributing the pressure evenly. Simple as that. Alright guys, hey, I'll see you next week. Bye bye.